but he's running. He's basically running a podcast and such around the industry and things like that. He likes to be a sounding board. I think he kind of falls into the same camp as all of us, and I think anybody at Design for that matter, where it's about what's right for the client and kind of, I guess, disrupting the industry in a reasonable way, not without being foolish about it.
Constructive disruption.
Correctly, that's what we call it, constructive disruption.
Giant shrimps.
So I'll let Yuri take over. But he's got how long were you in the business, Yuri? 30 years?
Well, I passed securities course in 1991 in April.
Okay. Yeah. So he did the rounds. He's like Gundy, Macquarie, and where else?
Well, Dominion Securities and Edward Jones, which is
Dominion,
very interesting firm.
Yeah.
Actually.
Okay. So Yuri, I'll hand it off to you. You can run with it, and we'll go from here.
Okay. So our guests today are the co-founders of Design Securities, and basically my first question will be off the script, and after that I will go straight into the script. So, co-founders, how did that happen? How do two people join ranks to actually come up with something new? And also, when you have to answer the question, how do you decide who goes first?
Well, I was always taught to respect my elders, so I guess Michael goes first.
Have you seen the movie Blackberry, where they agree that whenever Jim Balzilli crumples the paper, it means the other guy should shut up?
Yeah. Good movie.
Code science.
But so Jillian and I have known each other for 15 years. We've worked together in the investment dealer world for that long. And we had a former firm which was sold to a large public company. And, you know, we decided that for, well, I don't want to speak for Jillian, but for myself, I didn't see a future working for a large public company. I believe a dealer should be independent. So I resigned, and Jillian resigned for her own reasons. And later on, we connected and started talking about what we each were going to do going forward at you know, that time in our career.
Yeah, I'll agree with Michael, just from a sense that part of coming together is the familiarity of having worked together for so long. It didn't seem like much of a decision. It seemed very natural to say, well, you know, what are you up to? And, well, you know, what were my options, or what was I looking at? And I think when you have history and familiarity and you're both on the same page about certain things, particularly in the industry and some of what we believe about independence, it sort of seemed like a natural decision to say, well, what are our options to explore together? Because certainly combining forces and seeing what we can achieve is going to be a lot better than trying to do something on our own. So it sort of unfolded from there.
Well, I see. Well, so going back to the script, the words that we use there is what inspired you and what excites you about your joint venture, which you started in 2021, and you are now 3 years down the road. And from own experience, when you arrive to a change in your life, basically, sometimes it's not just inspiration and not just exciting things. Sometimes just life happens, circumstances change, and you have to reinvent yourself. So I'll rephrase our own question. Is it all inspirational and exciting? Or is there the other side to founding an independent firm? And really, how rosy is the path to independence?
Sorry, Yuri, if I could just interrupt, Yuri, you might want to move your microphone in a bit. You kind of you're fading in and out of, dialogue. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, at my stage, I'm 52 years old. 4 years ago, I disagreed with my business partners regarding the future of the company. It was eventually sold. And, you know, I was looking for something to do for the rest of my career. I wasn't ready yet to retire. There is a gap in the marketplace. And in terms of being entrepreneurial, you know, entrepreneurs solve problems. And we identified that the problem in the marketplace is that there are fewer and fewer independent dealers. We believe that dealers should be independent, and if we have an opportunity, the timing wasn't great because we were in the middle of COVID and there weren't a lot of advisors moving around from dealer to dealer. But generally, in terms of inspirational, it's doing something that's against the mainstream. It's doing something that's right for the client, and which is not necessarily the most profitable, but to try to do something that has never been done before or to get as close as possible to that was inspiring for me.
Yeah, for me, I think the excitement behind it or the inspirational part is that I was at a point in my career, I'd spent quite some time with the firm that I was with. I was looking for some change, and I do represent in some shapes and forms the millennial generation and have certain values and beliefs just about the way life is supposed to integrate with work and community and family and purpose and a lot of that sort of coming together. And I was at I guess, an inflection point of my own. And I thought, how do I really balance picking a career that can lead to something really exciting for another couple decades, of course, to continue working. Um, and it was inspirational to think about being in the industry that we were in because I do like this industry. I like what it's trying to achieve. I like a lot of the people I get to work with. There's lots of talented professional people, but to create something where we are working collaboratively with a lot of people and sort of Michael and I are in a position to decide how the firm operates, and we've chosen to work really closely with the voices of the advisors we're serving. And in the beginning, it really was just the two of us sort of saying, here's how we're going to get going. But as we've added people to the network, it has become sort of collaborative and it's creating something beyond what the two of us can come up with because we are taking the feedback. It is exciting to build something that has purpose and sort of has real meaning behind it. And for us to serve a client on a day-to-day basis, we are not the ones dealing with a client. So to come up with how to best serve them, I think we really have to listen to those voices of our advisors who are face to face, right? And every advisor is running a slightly different practice, and that's okay to us. But it's about listening to what one advisor might need and say is most important to their client base, and what another advisor says is most important to their client base. And our challenge and sort of the fun and the stress comes from how do you create a dealer that can be responsive and work with advisors to really build that network and that niche that helps everybody serve the way that they need and want to serve. So for me, it really came down to being able to be part of that creation process and the evolution as time goes on, because it's not, we decided here's the business, here's how it's going to be, and we're done. Every other week there's a new challenge where we have to think about how we want to approach something or whose opinion we're going to ask or how many advisors are we going to solicit feedback from. So it's a very intentional sort of pathway forward, and that's the fun of it.
Well, as a follow-up, you mentioned several times being independent, and quite frankly, I obviously did a bit of a research and I read articles in the Investment Executive about your process, about three big questions. But the question that I want to ask you is, what, in your opinion, and makes a dealer truly independent? And if you had to actually find one thing that separates true independence from not so independent, what would that be?
Well, if you did a survey of all of the dealers in Canada, all of them call themselves independent, including the banks, in their materials, on their website. So it's a coveted situation, like people want to be known as being independent, and there is no one agreed upon definition of independence. I think that most people think of bank versus non-bank in the Canadian marketplace. If you're non-bank, you're somehow independent, but yet the challenge there is you have, let's say, a large publicly traded insurance company who's essentially a product manufacturer or a fund company that is disguised as an investment dealer. So our view of independence is not controlled by a Wall Street private equity firm, not controlled by a large publicly traded insurance company, not controlled by a US parent company. Like it's a business where you don't have to go to somebody else to get a decision made. And I think for the advisor, it would be, as long as I'm following the CIRO rules, I should be able to do it. So that is anything to do with maybe even what products are on the shelf, all the way to can we do a podcast or not?
Okay,
Yeah.
and Jillian?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to stray from that answer. I have to agree. When you really narrow it down, it has to do with that controllership piece. And at any point along the chain of services that we provide, if somebody else is in control, then do we really have the independence that we claim to have? And for us to sort of keep that range out of other people's control and sort of within ourselves, I think that's what we're committed to when we think about independence, if we're sort of trying to define it ourselves.
If you don't mind, I'll include Ray because we know each other for 5 years. He recently joined you. He's proudly wearing a hat that kind of we designed together, inviting people to use the Pensionize Me service, which I highly recommend, but I'm opinionated. I also have an opinion what makes a firm truly independent, and I will share it. But I'd like Ray to actually kick in, basically, kind of toss in his hat in this.
Yeah, I think I'd have to echo what Michael said in terms of independence. Some of them disguise themselves as an asset manager with a front end of distribution, which is that truly independent? You don't know. Eventually, you become a distribution network for possibly that back end. So I think what attracted me about or to Design Wealth is the fact that there is no product manufacturing. In fact, whatever you're delivering to the client is customized. So I think that's the big thing. There's no gray area where you can say, are you truly independent? And as Michael said, with some of the bank-owned firms also stress independence. They can, choose whatever they want off the shelf, but are they truly independent? That becomes a debate. So to me, it was just really the separation of manufacturing versus delivering the product and service to the client, which is most important. I think client's number one.
If I may,
yep.
As a person who spent also 20 years in the industry, I think that you cannot be truly independent if you on a grid, because compensation defines motivation. And honestly, I think as a former advisor who spent all of his professional life on a grid, that the job of the advisor is to actually analyze businesses and tell people what to invest money in, or analyze business and basically their debt and if this debt is likely to be repaid and so on and so forth. So if that analysis doesn't apply to your own platform, which is your firm, broker dealer, and therefore that grid adds cost to your client, then I would start doubting all your analysis of stocks, bonds, and everything else, because at the very beginning, I came to you as an objective advisor, as a person who basically tries, among other things, to lower my costs of investing, which will take away from my returns, and I've been subjected to it. So I'm not saying that advisors on the grid are necessarily compromised, but true independence to me starts with absence of grid. The second one would be the advisor is a brand, which is basically evident, let's say, in Ray's opinion, right? If he was still at RBC Dominion Securities, he wouldn't be sitting inside of his own logo. RBC would be the brand, right? And the third one is, yes, you cannot be independent if you are linked to a product. If there's any preference or if there's any like internal regulations, like for instance, risk rating that blocks one product and unblocks your own made manufactured behind you, in-house, you're not truly independent. I don't know, maybe there's more, but to me, that's three big ones. Did I find something?
I think part of it, you hit it there, Yuri, was the absence of grid. That is, like you said, show me how I'm compensated, and that will drive behavior. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the comp and behavior is driven, and that's where a lot of titling, which we got rid of over the last few years, was basically driven by production. So I think the other thing that attracted me to Designed is the absence of the grid. And I'll let Michael or Julian speak to how it's structured, but that was another factor that made me make the move to Designed. So I'll hand it off to one of you two to answer that.
Well,
yes,
the flat fee is a way for everyone to be on the same level. So whether you have $25 million under management or $250 million under management, everyone would be treated the same way with a flat fee. Whereas with a grid, obviously the larger branches are making more money for the dealer. Therefore, most likely they're getting better service or taken care of first.
So if there was one thing that both of you or all three of you could change with a snap of the fingers, and we will change the rotation here. We will let's go clockwise, right? And start with Jillian, ladies first. So one thing you would change in the industry, be it regulatory or anything else, what would that be?
I think you might get a similar answer from maybe all three of us, but I don't think advisors should be paid to move to other dealers. I think it is a material conflict for an industry that's very focused on conflicts of interest, including things like being on a grid. I agree that's part of the spectrum of what makes you independent. I think if you aren't on a grid, you've removed one of those conflicts and one of those pieces that doesn't make you independent or does make you independent. And when you're paid to choose a dealer, I think it's a significant impediment to being able to explain to clients why you really picked somewhere to be. So I think if I could change one thing, I don't feel that that's an appropriate way for dealers to attract advisors. And at the very least, it's something that needs to have more light shed on it, and it needs to be something that's more transparent. Clients need to understand when that's a variable that's at play, because right now it's very much in the background. It's not something that's disclosed, and it is very sort of handled out of sight. So the only people really that know about it are the dealer and the advisor, despite the significance of the decision and its impact on that advisor's clients.
If I think about it and what you just said, I think that most clients, investing clients, don't realize that their advisor for getting paid, which you would change, is also basically getting a forgivable loan, which ties him up at the firm for about 5 years, and basically kind of also is something that would probably stop most people from changing firms even if you would establish that it's not so good for you, for your clients, and that basically, the honeymoon passes and you're there. you've been paid, and basically you are now an employee. Let's call a spade, and you don't work for the client. You work for your employer.
Mhm.
So, Michael, one thing.
I think that when advisors decide to leave their dealer, as long as they're self-employed, or let's say not employees of the dealer, if they're self-employed, they should be able to do a bulk transfer of their clients from one dealer to another. So currently, when an advisor leaves, they have to meet with each person individually and get them to sign off on documentation to leave. So let's say you have 125 clients, you have to have 125 client transfers rather than one. So that would be something that to me would be beneficial if the advisor makes a decision to leave, they should be able to move all of the clients simultaneously.
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's a good one. And also it removes one thing that basically happens, and you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. When an advisor plans a move, he probably speaks to clients beforehand, which obviously regulators wouldn't like, but let's not be naive, right? As a former advisor now for 5 years, I can say things that I think and nobody can stop me. Right? So, and that's a beauty, right?
I would have to say, agree with both Julian and Michael. The bulk transfer would be nice. It does cut back on a lot of administrative work for the advisor as well as for the clients, because they have multiple accounts. As far as the compensation, I think that's a big one, because you're starting to see a lot of movement between dealers as advisors are going to retire, so they're kind of looking for that, I hate to say it, the last kick at the can, so to speak, to get paid out. And I guess you can't hate the player, you have to hate the game. So to Julian's point, that should maybe more light should be shone on that aspect of it.
Well, very interesting, and leads me to follow up question, which is there's 14,000 advisors in Canada over the age of 55. And most of them are in the retirement industry business, but they have to retire themselves. So how are they going to retire themselves and monetize if they cannot get paid for selling books before retirement? How would they be monetizing for retirement? How would they actually say, this is my practice and I created it, it's my book of business, how do I retire? And let's say there is no intergenerational variation where there's a son with a lot of letters, like all of you have CIM, CPA, PhD, CIM, and so on, right? Let's say it's not in the family. What do you do?
Well,
for me,
sorry, Jillian, you go.
it's hard to know who should speak first. I'll tie mine
Clockwise,
just back.
ladies first. Sorry.
Yeah. I'll tie
No,
mine
we
back
can do
just to.
counterclockwise. We will do the opposite next time. We will change it.
Okay. I'll tie mine back just to my previous answer about that payment, because I think for an advisor who's worked really hard and built up a business and they're self-employed and in this industry as an agent where you're not an employee, you don't have necessarily things like a pension that is part of your employment. So selling your book, I think, is still an excellent way for advisors to gain the benefit of their hard work and find a buyer that is an advisor. What I dislike about the industry is that buyer can be a dealer, which is what motivates the advisor to change and move to a different dealer. Whereas when advisors do their due diligence to find someone that they feel would be a good match for their client, and the other advisor is going to be making the payment, clients are likely to understand it a lot more, because it's not hidden, right? Like, it's very obvious. The advisor says, I'm retiring. This is the person I've selected. They're, buying my book of business. And I think a lot of clients understand that sort of phase and that element. I think it's really confusing for clients, and it's not necessarily to their benefit for dealers to be paying for that. So that's where I think that you capture that as a retiring advisor. What do? You have to do the due diligence to find a really good match and a good fit. And then in the course of that transaction, you know, there's an evolution that your clients, you know, come in and they can um, be part of the experience, and you know, there could be a smooth handoff.
Well, my dentist sold his practice and did the same, but as far as I understand, advisors in Canada still cannot incorporate. And basically, that's a question to both of you, to Michael, and sorry, maybe you just wanted to kind of go into and answer the same question as Jillian, but it's kind of, are we going to have approach to consultants, which advisors are the same as we have to accountants and lawyers and so on and so forth? Is it even in the works?
I would say that within 2 or 3 years, there's going to be an incorporated advisor model. I think right now, the challenge will be in terms of the, you know, dialogue with the regulators. Would it be a professional corporation, in which case you would have to be licensed in the business to be a shareholder? Would it be just a typical limited company where any shareholder, regardless of whether they were licensed or not, you know, could be an owner? I think that there's enough momentum and enough has been discussed at the high levels within the regulators that I think you'll see an incorporated advisor, regardless of how they're registered. I think that the challenge right now is to try to come up with what is going to be the ultimate end structure. Jillian, you maybe want to add to that?
Yeah, I think a part of the challenge is just getting everyone onto the same page, because it's the regulator, of course, but there are implications with the CRA, and each province can have certain limiting legislation or rules that interfere with sort of saying, well, here's one way and let's all do it this way. So it is, there are some complications to it. I think the regulators want to find something sooner than later and sort of get this one dealt with, because it gets a lot of attention. It's a high priority on a lot of people's list. And because there are significant differences between sort of the old ways of doing things and how the regulator wants to move forward, these are the items they want to clean up, right? They want to get some of these discrepancies resolved once and for all. So they are motivated to move through it. But it's, you know, it has its own challenges.
Well, me and Ray, we talk about RIA model and how at least they acknowledge in the US, you know, in the neighboring country, that they are a separate kind of operators. They are practitioners, right? In Canada, unfortunately, we call everybody an advisor, but basically there are different business models. And Ray is new to this business model because he was at DS at portfolio management side, and now he's in the retail side. So he probably on his wish list kind of has a preference as to be professional corporation or just a corporation. And also our next question doesn't come to him because it's about your biggest challenges and things that you did wrong in your 3 years as a co-founders and running Design Securities. But before you address and think about your, you know, bloopers or misfortunes or mistakes, basically, I would ask Ray like what he would prefer to be as far as, you know, a practitioner of advice, and then we're gonna go to regrets.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that were in there. So from a practitioner perspective, incorporation would be nice, but you can see the complexity involved, because then at each dealer you would have a separate corporation for each advisor. So there is a lot of things that need to be thought through carefully before you can do that. As far as the retirement side of things go, and Jillian touched on it, yeah, as an advisor, because there are no pension plans or anything else, you should be entitled to sell your book. I think where one risk lies is when people are selling within the traditional banker-owned or bank-owned dealer network, is at the end of the day, who owns the client? If the bank is paying out the advisor at retirement, do they now own the client when they hand it off to the other advisor, or does the advisor own that client? And I think that's a bit of a gray area from my perspective, like who has rights to the client at that point? Because if that new advisor then wants to move to another dealer, will the bank-owned dealer block that person from approaching the clients? I mean, there's a fiduciary responsibility on the advisor's side to notify people that you're leaving, and they have that right to choose. But I think it becomes a very tough situation when the bank is actually financing those buyouts of books. I think at the end of the day, at some point, Mike said in 2 to 3 years, we'll see incorporated advisors. I would be surprised at some point that we actually see advisors just simply as employees of the bank dealers again at some point. That's kind of my view. But
well, and the headcount of employed advisors is falling because basically, it seems like one of the strategies that they kind of understand very well and follow, no exception, is economies of scale. And that simply means like squeezing assets up to the top, right? And cutting off the smaller producers, which doesn't take into consideration whether they actually add any meaningful value or not to clients, which should be the main criteria.
yeah, and I think a couple of things. Technology has also allowed us as advisors or portfolio managers to manage more money efficiently. I mean, back in the day, it would be very difficult to manage, $100 million or $250 million book, or even bigger. There's $1 billion books out there. But with technology, you can leverage that significantly. And again, one of the attractions here at Designed is the digital onboarding process. I can literally open an account and have it funded within 20 minutes and be ready to go. So if you know how to leverage technology, you can manage a lot more money. And that's where, like you said, Yuri, things are kind of floating to the top of the pyramid, for lack of a better description, where they're squeezing out everybody else, and then there'll be maybe one super advisor with employees, or maybe everybody will be employed. Who knows?
Well, you can squeeze out the toothpaste out of the tube, but how do you squeeze it back in? Basically, sometimes they squeeze out talent that shouldn't be squeezed out. And speaking about technology, which I know that Designed is big on, I'll tell you that technology is amazing. I know that both of you, Jillian and Michael, have written that sometimes the firm will just more or less tell you this is the technology that you're going to be using and paying us, and it's unnecessary. But I'm all pro technology because a little secret, Ray and I were 4 years ago thinking about launching an ETF, and technology kind of makes ETF launching process obsolete, in a sense that you can create digital strategies. They're basically virtual ETFs. We can replicate an index now, like, in anything on certain platforms. We have toolboxes for that. So even our own concept basically changed materially with technology. But before we go into technology and advisor tools and what can be done and what things that clients probably don't even know, that there's certain bright things. Let's go back to this moments of doubt or mistakes. Anything? Who wants to start?
Well, I think we did reasonably well. We signed, I would say, over 50 contracts in COVID without meeting people face to face, and we maybe signed one bad one. We won't talk about what that is, but we were able to get out of it. But I think in terms of how you contemplate what might happen versus what actually happened, probably in terms of regrets, I wish I connected with more people on LinkedIn before they put in the 150 per week limit on connections. Because LinkedIn is
I never heard of this. Okay.
But
Curb my enthusiasm.
But in terms of, wouldn't say regret, but probably it took me a long time to realize that advisors don't leave a dealer because there's an opportunity somewhere else. They leave a dealer because they are aggravated and they are unhappy and they don't see a way out. And I actually hired a sales coach, and I've been in sales all my life. but it took me back to sales training 101 to understand that, you know, I could talk about how great we are versus everybody else, but if the advisor hasn't mentally made the decision to leave, doesn't matter what I say to them, they're not leaving. So then you change who you target. Then you start to look for dealers where the advisors are generally unhappy rather than going after advisors that we may be an upgrade to where they are, but they're pretty happy.
Well, it's like in Seinfeld, if you remember, there was an episode where the guy says, "We don't name names." that was an episode of Elaine, you know, dating a communist. And I was born in a communist country. But I'm not going to name names about dealerships where the advising representatives are mostly unhappy. But honestly, I don't see too many happy people in non-independent firms, without naming names. So happiness. When I got squeezed out, let's call a spade, I was thinking about true independence. Your firm was not on the horizon yet, basically, and I briefly thought about it. But quite honestly, people are not at their best when they're dealing with their money. The book was called Predictably Irrational for a reason. And I got tired, honestly, dealing with irrational behavior and holding hands and being, you know, compliant and competent and compassionate at the same time, right? 3 big C's. So I'm happy not being an advisor, but basically, what I think and what do you think is the main promise, the main difference, the main thing that most advisors who joined you envision? What do they gain that they didn't have before? And let's now go counterclockwise, and we will start with an advisor who joined you and basically who obviously has expectations.
Thanks, Yuri. Put me on the spot here.
Absolutely. You're wearing a big hat.
Yeah, right on. I guess Michael mentioned, you know, about people making moves, you know, when they're disgruntled or what have you. I think a lot of that has to do with psychology, where you know, if you're comfortable, there's that fear of change, you know. But you know, what's constantly happening is there's constant change happening in the business, especially in our business. That's what attracted me to it. But what are the expectations? I mean, what I like is the true independence of Design Wealth. I mean, there's no back end. We're not a distribution network for anybody. There's no perceived pressure to try to deliver product. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these asset managers buying up independents, like the smaller independents, because they want that distribution, because they are being blocked out by the bank-owned dealers. Everybody's becoming very gated in terms of what's being allowed on the shelf. So for my view is it's the independence, the true independence, where you know, you mentioned, you know, branding myself, we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to do podcasts, as Michael said. You know, we have to follow the serial rules, obviously, but there's a lot more latitude, and as long as you don't go outside the lines, it's great. And you know, I think most people that are truly on the independent side are cognizant of that. They're not crazy in terms of their expectations to clients, telling them what they can deliver. As long as you're rational, it's good. So for me, it's really the independence of the firm.
You mentioned flat fees, and flat fees were your and I big idea, and all of a sudden turns out that your new firm is also big on that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you probably are on the similar train of thought on quite a few things. And I'll ask Michael now to say, what is it that well, you know what I asked, so.
Sorry, what was the question again?
The question was, what's the biggest differentiator and expectation that an advisor joining your firm probably has, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I would say that the expectation is that the dealer would help them build the platform together, working with them so that the platform could do what the advisor needs to recommend what's best for the client, rather than the dealer say, here's what we offer, take it or leave it. So whether that's a product that needs to be on the shelf, whether that's some sort of software that needs to interface with our custodian, or just even a mindset. So I think being able to customize, being flexible with the way that we do business, I think is not, there is no competition. We have no competition for that in the marketplace. Everybody's trying to grow and gather assets, but nobody's doing what we're doing in that sense.
Customization is big in everything. Another book, The Age of Platforms, and you building platforms, and even when you're all on the same platform, you're on the different, sections of the platform, basically, if we talk in literal platform. So nobody ever is on the same one. I'm huge on integrations and customizing things now that I'm in the digital media for advisors kind of area. But there's blurred lines here, like in a good way, right? Because there's more and more hybrids, where is this difference between what used to be called robo-advisors and full service and everything? And again, I'm borrowing from your own book and your own articles in the Investment Executive, but I think hybrids are the way of the future. And Jillian, please, the biggest expectation of people joining your firm as you see it.
Yeah, the biggest expectation. I actually think it's something that's really hard to get people to uh, resonate with until after they join. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but Ray, you can back me up on this one, hopefully, but we are very open, very honest when we talk with prospective advisors. We don't have a lot to hide, and unless there is a confidentiality agreement or something in the background, we answer people's questions in writing. We tell them, if something's a rule or how it works or how it's going to work. And it is refreshing, but there's a lot of skepticism, right? I mean, people who are not part of our network will see Michael or myself as a salesperson. We just want them to join the dealer. But the truth is, we are being very open and honest. And when they get here and they start to actually live and breathe what we said and told them all along, I think a lot of our advisors go, "Wow, you're really delivering what you said. You didn't blindside me with anything. You didn't bait me in with something and then give me something else when I got here." And it's a really refreshing sort of feeling for advisors to be part of a dealer that is that truthful. And because it's not, there's a lot of things that dealers don't share or they don't want to say, or they hide behind a bit, and that's more of a traditional model and it's a bit old school thinking. For us, just keeping everything open and honest and just telling them like it is and being straightforward, I think is an expectation that advisors would love for that expectation to be met. And we've been successful in having that expectation met after advisors join us, and they share in telling us that they're very happy with what they thought they were getting and how their experience goes. Ray, I don't know if I can throw that to you for a second to maybe corroborate a little, but I think you've had a similar feeling. There's everything that you've heard other dealers say that they could do to get you to join them, and what we said we do, and you've hopefully had that exact experience with us.
100%. I can say that Design World is completely transparent, not hiding anything, and that reflects into my business model as well, where I'm very transparent with my fees. My clients know exactly what they're paying for their fees, commissions, account fees, and so forth. I'm completely transparent. So coming into Designed, it was refreshing, and there's always that skepticism. It's like, okay, are you just pitching me, or is this going to be for real? And the transparency so far has been fantastic. I mean, what's bizarre to me, having been in the business, is being able to see everything on one dashboard and track what's happening. So if you're expecting money to come in for a client, you can actually see where it is in the process. Whereas before you were always dependent on somebody in a back office somewhere. We still are dependent on those people, but I can actually look at it and say, okay, here we are. We're at this stage in the process. It's been submitted, what have you. And this is where if there's a holdup or a rejection, you know exactly what's going on. The other thing is everything's on one dashboard. I mean, I can do a money movement very quickly for a client in or out. So there, again, getting back to the technology and just the transparency of Design Wealth. I mean, it's been very refreshing, to be quite honest with you. It's wild.
Thanks, Ray.
Oh, this is complete. I'm totally honest here. Not a paid what do you call it, endorsement. This is 100% time.
Oh, if I may, so you're accessible and you're transparent, and I was always big on being radically truthful. And if you think about why the adjective radical, because would you rather be like modestly dishonest? So basically, there's no other truth but radical, and that is very refreshing, as they say. Technology liberates because it removes a lot of mundane things and actually a need for assistance. I wasn't a big producer when I was an advisor, but I needed an assistance. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to handle the workload. And from what I hear from Ray, it's been very, very revealing, especially when you compare and the comparison is fresh, right? So again, we're not going to name names, but what a difference. Huge difference. And as they say, you cannot make a second first impression. So Ray, I will reveal a little secret. This dividend detective is very happy. He doesn't need any doctors to hold his hand or basically kind of support him. So far, so good, as they say. And the next question on the list is basically, what are your strategies to attract advisors, make yourself known, and how do you think advisors should attract clients? What do you think advisor marketing encompasses? Basically, your thoughts on that. How do you tell the world?
Well, the old techniques still work. So we still use direct mail, and it has a real stamp, and you have to find the advisor's address. And sometimes, especially with banks, the address is a head office and the branch manager gets all the mail. So I mean, there are some flaws, but direct mail still works. Cold calling still works. LinkedIn is growing for us as a means, but probably 1/3 of the advisors don't have a LinkedIn page or a website. So that's where you have to go to official databases to find, where you can send a piece of mail, for instance. But then you also have the younger generation of advisors using things like Google Analytics, spending money on the internet, driving traffic. There's algorithms, and I think that's sort of like the future of marketing, and also how do you use artificial intelligence is something we've started to explore in terms of our business development. So I think for us it's a mixture of the old techniques, because many of the advisors that have been around, like I'm a Generation X, we sort of look at things sometimes in the old-fashioned way. But if you're trying to target a 32-year-old advisor, you have to think about how they might think. And I think advisors, have to sometimes go back to what they did 20 years ago. And I mean, the ratios are still there because we've been doing it. And we have the results using some of the old Glengarry, Glen Ross lead cards and knocking on doors.
Well, when they say always be selling, the only question that the seller, well, I heard an expression, You born, you sell, you die. And no matter what you're selling yourself. Right. So in some way, you have to kind of show to people from own experience how you think. You know, a thought leader is an overused expression. I almost, you know, have sour taste when they say it again. Everybody wants to be a thought leader. But if they don't share your concept and they don't understand how you invest money for them, at some point, holding hands will not work. They will panic. They will abandon the strategy. And most of the time, at the worst possible, you know, moment, really. So I've seen that. Another thing that resonated with me basically was this. Not even resonate. You mentioned your generation. Jillian, what's your generation? Technically, I'm a baby boomer, and I should be ashamed of that. We have a stigma, but Ray is not. I'm one of the younger last baby boomers, basically, right? But you are?
I'm a millennial.
All right. So there's 111 million millennials and Gen Z in the US voters and 70 million boomers. But boomers have 10 times more wealth. And I suspect that in Canada, a situation is similar. So how would a millennial advise a boomer? Because there's not too many people, you know, to advise who have real wealth, unfortunately. And I have 2 adult children, and I feel sorry for them. But, you know, so intergenerational. How do older advisors, and that's a majority, court the young one? How do young advisors court the older one? Because that's a majority. And also, next question after that is, massive wealth transfer is coming up. With it come massive taxes, right? And all kinds of issues. So let's talk about intergenerational stuff a little.
I can jump on that from the advisor perspective. I think again, just getting back to the platform at Designed Securities, there is no minimum household fee. Like if you go to a bank dealer, they'll have minimum amounts of revenue that needs to be generated. Obviously, you want to cover. There are costs to operate an account. You want to make sure those are covered. But you know, there are situations where you know you're managing money for the parents, but the kids don't have a lot and they need help to get started. And you're able to do that on this platform. Whereas at other places, you say, well, you have to go to a different network for delivery. And when you accumulate X number of dollars, then come back. Well, that's a turnoff for a lot of millennials or anybody who's trying to build their wealth. So from that perspective, it's you try to, you know, create that intergenerational transfer within your book of business. So you are dealing with the kids at an early stage, and while you're dealing with the parents in their you know wealth years. The other thing is I identify as Gen X, so I'm in Michael's camp. So we're both Gen Xers. I think from our perspective is if you talk to advisors, they're always scared about change. And again, the one thing that's constant is change. So you have to embrace the technology. I mean, when Robo came out, it was supposed to be a big disruptor, and it is to a certain extent, but there are some, you know, hiccups in that scenario. But now with the advent of AI and as things are moving forward, and you use the term hybrid model, Yuri, I mean, we built that index within an AI tool, and we can, you know, essentially now at Designed Wealth, I can custom index, break things apart, build whatever I want. So either you embrace what's happening or you just resist, and I hate to say it, you die. So you have to keep embracing what's happening and the change and just try to adapt. And, you know, that's the big thing, is being to adapt to the situation. So that's kind of my long answer to intergenerational transfer of wealth. You have to be able to talk to the millennials and Z, as well as handle the Xers. I mean, they're getting a little bit more tech savvy as well.
Michael, anything to add to this?
I mean, I think that you know, one of the things that I've only recently realized is, regardless of how old the advisor is, the high net worth clients resonate with a high-end digital platform and expect it. So if you don't have that, then you're not gonna be able to deal with that part of the marketplace. So I think it just depends on what is your style of business. If you're a financial planner, a portfolio manager, or if you're going after the average household, or if you're going after, you know, 8-figure accounts, the higher net worth clients more would resonate with a platform that has a very strong tech presence in digital.
Well, as the oldest here, as a boomer, I'll tell you that my 88-year-old mother uses an iPad, an iPhone, and arrived to this country at age 65 and basically learned a new language and has a pretty fluent English. So yes, you have to adjust, as both of you said, or you fall behind and you won't be able to catch up. You're toast. And whether you accept technology or not, it arrived, it's here. And quite frankly, I learned to build applications for advisors and build websites. Granted, I had interest in marketing and I started in 2008, but the moment you stop learning and mastering new tools, it's the beginning of the end. Sorry, Jillian.
Yeah, I think being adaptable and flexible is certainly really key. I sort of lost my train of thought a bit, but sometimes I think it has less to do necessarily with the generations and how you might approach that, albeit that's a lens you could take when trying to consider how to connect or attract clients. But the truth is, at the end of the day, in this industry, Ray's job is to be able to develop enough trust with somebody, regardless of how old they are, that they're willing to give him their money and make financial decisions, not necessarily on their behalf, but with them and coach them. And if he can't build trust with somebody that's a boomer or a millennial or a Gen Z, like it's a skill there itself to be personable and to go through a discovery process with a client at any age and be able to show them, you know, your capabilities and how you build trust and answer their questions, because regardless of how old you are, everybody's going to have their own questions and maybe they're motivated slightly by their generation. But I think at the end of the day, if you have a process for yourself and each advisor does have their own approach, I think if they're confident in their approach, they can resonate with any person of any age to build the trust. Because at the end of the day, if they don't have that, the client's not going to sit there and sort of give them the power to help with their financial decisions. They're going to go somewhere else where they feel more comfortable. So that's sort of, I guess, what I'll add into the conversation. But yeah, generations play a certain role, but I think the industry is the same no matter what age you are. It's a trust-based job that these advisors have to do.
Well, what you said makes a lot of sense. I think simply because confidence in offering your services should, in my opinion, come from two things. One, you have to know that you're materially improving people's life. You add value. It's called unique value proposition for a reason. And if you know that you do, that's half of the thing. And the litmus test here, again, in my opinion, is, do you just talk the talk or do you walk the walk? It's like most Nobel economics prize winners never invested money in their strategies. Think about it. And when they did, sometimes, you know, the results were bloopers. So eating your own pie is also a key and works for every generation. So let's end the intergenerational thing and how the older advisors and younger advisors, you know, actually sell or offer their value proposition to a different generation. That's really not so important. Now, to the next question, which is define success. Let's go back clockwise to clockwise and start with Jillian. Jillian, how you see success of the firm and the time horizon on?
Yeah, certainly growth is always a great indicator of success. I mean, we are growing and we're proving that there's something here that people want, and the proof is in the pudding, I think the saying is. Uh, but I would say also a significant measure of success for us is the feedback that we get, because what we don't want to hear is, you know, we have growth and we see the numbers going up, but in behind the scenes and through the grapevine, we're hearing that people don't actually think it's very good, and they're just as unhappy here as they were maybe somewhere else, or we've missed the mark and we've missed their expectations. So even though we're growing and that's a great sign, we have to make sure that that's not sort of jeopardizing the people that are already here and the experience people have when they get here in terms of their ongoing experience, you know, every day after they join. So that feedback, and sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's informal. The idea is to keep our ears open, to be available and accessible, and for advisors to be able to reach out and get a hold of Michael or I or one of the, you know, more senior people. If they can't get a hold of us, that's a problem. Like, they need access to us and they need to be able to share their opinion and their feedback and share their ideas or the things that they think we should be focusing on. And so far, I think we've built a good community of people who have ideas and they're interested and engaged. And not every advisor wants to be part of that. Some people are quite happy to sort of be here and that's all. And others say, well, I have these ideas and could we chat and could we get on the phone? And I think those are important metrics of success.
Michael?
For me, it's not about the money. Like, money isn't all that important to me. The key is to have somebody come to you and say something like, I've been in this business for 25 years, and in the last 5 minutes, you've taught me more or introduced me to more
Mm-hmm.
than I've had from anybody in the dealer world. And I think that, you know, walking down Wellington Street and bumping into somebody I haven't seen for years, and they tell you, like, you know, you've really, what you've done is very different and it's very unique, and then I'm glad that you did it, is success for me.
Just going where, you know, boldly go basically where where nobody went before, and discoveries and achievements and the journey, the process, right? If I understand you correctly. I see. Well, Ray, you know, the success of the firm is a success, and success of advisor are intertwined, basically. So I will slightly kind of, like, you know, reposition this for you, basically. How do you convince people to move to a relatively new and unknown name, considering that success is coming? I'm confident about it, but that's because I'm an industry insider, and nobody can take it away from me, no matter how long into retirement I am. And retirements last about 22 years on average in Canada, longer than a marriage, which is 14. So coming back to advisors, right? Now you're married to a new firm, right? Basically, you're not planning on retiring, but how do you tell them, guys, this is it. They're going to be successful. I'm telling you, you know, all your conventional ways of assessing how good or solid the firm is are obsolete. Follow me. How do you do that?
It's kind of it almost does it itself. And I'll tell you what experience I've had with a current client. He's I would say, let's put it this way, very, very sophisticated. And the one thing that he appreciates from my perspective when we're discussing strategy, portfolio strategy, or you know, positioning in the portfolio is, and he said this straight up, he says, the one thing I like when I talk to you is you never say our analysts are saying X or we are saying Y. He says, I come to you with some ideas or or something I want to implement. I will either come back with it or we'll kind of work together. So I actually work with the client and I come back with the solution. And it'll probably be a suite of things, maybe 2 or 3 choices, and you just go through each one and say, these are the pros and cons of each one. Now, which one best suits the situation that we want to achieve? So it's the true independence where I can really shop the market for whatever I need for this client without having to necessarily fall back and say, well, our analysts, or we're saying this or we're saying that. So that's number one. That's a current experience. From attracting new clients, it really comes down to, fortunately, I've been doing this for coming up to 25, 30 years. So it's my experience. I just tell them I'm on an independent platform. I don't have product to push. I can actually customize for you what you need. Now, does that mean everybody gets a customized portfolio? More or less, yes. But there are some commonalities across the book. But generally, I can build a bespoke model or a bespoke portfolio for a client, and that's because of the technology available. So it really comes down to, when you're talking about a newer fledgling firm, is the players. So I was fortunate to know Michael and Jillian from a previous life, so that did help in terms of the confidence to make that move. And when it comes from a client perspective, honestly, all they care about at the end of the day is, number one, can you communicate? Are we on the same page together in terms of the strategy? So I even tell clients, I say, if you don't take ownership of what we're going to do together, we can't work together. I just don't want to get in that situation where I'm desperate for assets to say, I want the account, even though it doesn't suit my style. So that's number one. Can we work together? And then number two, are the assets safe? And that's the bottom line. And with Design Wealth, the assets are safe. The back office is there. It's just like dealing with any other dealer. There's no issues. The money is there. It's not like I'm generating statements like Bernie Madoff. Everything's generated elsewhere, sent to the client, and that's it. So for the client, it's, can we work together? And then number two, are my assets safe? And you present them with that, and it's pretty easy actually once you get into a conversation.
So to follow up on what you just said, basically, they do ask about custody.
Yeah.
Even not so sophisticated clients, and again, we're not going to name names. I know who the sophisticated client is. And basically, some people don't even know what custody or custodian is. But the thing is, all of them want to know if, for lack of more diplomatic words, if the firm has any chance of going belly up. So, Michael, how do you reassure people that despite the novelty, there's enough stability there and they have nothing to worry about?
We have a corporate chart that we can send, which is, it's not inside information or proprietary by any means. It's a corporate chart that explains the ownership and the capitalization of our custodian, which is a $140 billion custodian that has significant financial backing. That is, I mean, in Canada, if you're not a bank, there are always going to be questions. But if you can show them that there's financial stability with, financial powerhouse underneath, supporting the custodian, I mean, that has worked for us in the past.
Quite frankly, in 2008, in the middle of the great financial crisis, I had to leave a bank. Again, I'm not going to name names, and join the Independent. And I'm going to name a name here because the Independent doesn't exist anymore. They sold to Macquarie, and it was called Blackmont. Blackmont was relatively kind of freewheeling. There was a grid, but in many other ways, they were somewhat independent. And that's where I got a marketing virus. But what happened is I ran a strategy closed-end fund arbitrage that nobody else did. And because my clients couldn't get it at the bank that I was leaving, or the bank that kind of hinted that they would like me to leave, they all followed me. And the questions about custody were the only ones that they ever asked. And I said, well, part owned by Scotia, part owned by CI. And then I dropped some ridiculous amount of billions that they had, and that was the end of questioning. Jillian, sorry. Just had to recollect, like, you know, how that went for me. They went from
And
a
I
bank to a small name that nobody ever heard of, and I
Yeah.
completely forgot about it. But actually, it was refreshingly. I think I only lost one client that I wanted to lose, quite frankly, and that's it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think my comment to that would just be related to who the client is in a relationship with. And I think advisors who have done a very good job at building the personal relationship and being front facing, and it's Ray and the client working together. And it just, there are players in the background sort of thing. And if sometimes those players have to change, the client is reassured because, you know, Ray is not changing. So whether that's bank in the background or it's a newer firm in the background, if the advisor didn't use that previously as part of their value proposition, then it's not, then the client doesn't resonate with that either. So, because we have seen, you know, some advisors, they leverage the, say it's a bank, right? They're leveraging that bank brand that's in the background. And that creates a problem if they ever want to leave and be part of the independent space, because the clients will say, but all this time you've been promoting bank XYZ and how that's such a great piece of stability for your practice. So they've already messaged to the client that the independent space is the Wild West and not stable at all. Whereas other advisors, you know, have really not included, say, let's say the bank as part of their value proposition. They've said, here's what I have to offer. And, you know, at the bank, I'm able to do that, but I could do it in many different places. And if the advisor comes back to their client and says, you know, for me to keep my practice going the direction I want, you know, I have to look at a different offering in the background. And I've found someone that can do that for me. And we're gonna, you know, make a move and make a change. And clients are more receptive to it because they never really leaned on the bank brand to begin with. So I think that's one thing that advisors can do or maybe contemplate when they're setting up their business, is that the relationship the client has is really with them. It's not with the back office.
Well, you know, if you think about it, if they listen to you so many times as to where to put their personal capital and money, and if you basically moving to another firm, unless they know or think that you're getting, and we coming back to where our discussion started,
Mhm.
getting paid
Yeah.
a lot of money for which you're gonna be in debt with forgivable loan for next 5 years. And after that, there will be all other kinds of things that are vesting in the future, right?
Yeah.
So if you did that and actually said the banks is the way to go, and then you abruptly change your tune, well, first of all, you lose face, and
Yeah.
and secondly, it's simply not true. So now, in conclusion, and Michael had to leave, I understand, but in conclusion, our last question on the menu was, how do you stay abreast of things? How do you handle change? How do you, you know, look at, you know, what's happening in the industry, where the puck is going, so to speak, and so on and so forth. So that's your number 99 question. Almost
Yeah.
the last on the roster, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
So
It's a good one, and Michael and I often use that puck example. You know, in essence, we don't want to go anywhere near where the puck is going. We go
well, the
everywhere else
puck is
because
going into Florida Panthers goal. That's where it's going. Really,
yeah,
it's a big day for us. But anyway, where is the puck
yeah.
going?
I think it's about staying engaged. So as an example, Michael and I are both on different committees, including regulatory committees and industry advocacy committees, and nurturing our network. I mean, we spend a lot of time not just dealing with advisors of our own or prospects, but we have, because we have an open product shelf, for example, we have different relationships with, could be fund manufacturers, it could be people in the, you know, in the private space, alternative space. We've got a lot of people that we check in with, and we say, well, what are you seeing from your perspective? And you have to stay engaged and have that regularly. You can't sort of, every now and then see what's happening. You have to commit the time. So for both of us, I think finding those pockets in the industry where if I'm in this part of a committee, Michael will take on a different committee. So we divide and conquer. We also send our staff and our team, we send them to events, make sure that they're going to different industry, happenings to make sure that when they come back, they say, hey, I heard something really interesting, and we have those dialogues and we keep them going, because that's how, you hear one thing and then you hear another, and then you start to tie it together, and that's how you stay connected to what's happening in the landscape, because advisors are busy with their clients. I mean, we have great connections with our advisors, but they don't have the same interface within the dealer world that we do. So it's important for us to stay involved with regulators, with other dealers. We talk with our competition. We're friendly people, and this is business, but that's all it is. It's business, right? We all have bigger things in life, and including our family and friends and other things that we do. And it's enjoyable to get to meet the people that we get to meet, whether they're with a competitor or a regulator or an advisor. So keeping those conversations going, seeing what's out there, and just sort of participating where the opportunities arise is how we stay involved in understanding what's happening, what's going on out there, what are the changes, and making sure we know the right questions to ask and when to ask them.
Using the hockey terminology, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm big on tennis, but I played hockey. I was a goaltender, just simply I can catch things. Good at catches. So how many advisors now on your roster? What's the head count basically, and how do you coach them, and how do you basically help them to professionally grow?
Yeah, great question. We're over 100. We have passed that milestone, if you will, and we do have sort of a variety of advisors in terms of their needs. So some advisors are very clear about their value proposition. They really want little interference from us. They know what they're doing. They've said, I've got my message, I've got my client book, and that's fine. So we stay out. We don't sort of keep poking them if they don't want us to have an opinion or to be a sounding board for, that's fine. And we're very fortunate. We do have advisors that they're comfortable to come forward and they say, hey, here's where I'd like to sort of penetrate the market, or here's an idea I have. Sorry, I'm just losing my voice a little. We have one advisor that's working on an app herself. So, we've got on calls with her. She's given us demos, sort of asked us this and that. We have other advisors, they call us to say, well, I want to discuss before I join, because that's always an opportunity for advisors to reflect. They've said, can we talk about different fee structures? Maybe I should reconsider how I'm billing my clients, or a way to do this more efficiently or a bit better. So advisors they're prompting us for what they need. So how we help support is not really to go out to everybody and say, okay, we want to book our annual meeting and weigh in on what you're doing. And instead we say we're open. Michael has a tremendous amount of experience in the industry. He was an advisor. I worked with him in the past, and we're both accountants by designation. So the credentials sometimes have some value, and people want to say, hey, I've got some tax things I want to discuss, and we help give them resources or point them in the right direction. So there's any number of ways that someone might reach out and say, hey, like, can you help with this? And if it's not me or it's not Michael, it could be someone else on the team. It could be someone at the back office. They have expertise sometimes that's available to them. The other day, I put an advisor in touch with another one of our advisors who had recently been through something with a client just related to the US and 401ks, and not a common situation. I said, instead of talking with me, I'm going to put you in touch with this other advisor who just literally did exactly what you're asking, and talk to them about their experience. So we have different ways we try to support people, and it can really range from very little to really working with someone on their own business plan. So there's no one-stop shop, here's how we do it. It's sort of we figure it out as we go, and as advisors ask us the questions, we find the place to get them the best answers.
Before I ask Ray, I just want to engage him in the sense that as he was a portfolio manager at RBC Dominion Securities, and I worked at RBC Dominion Securities. My experience there was that a lot of conferences, there were sometimes interesting speakers, but a lot of that was corporate cheerleading. And basically, well, so where I'm coming with this is that I consider Ray a very smart, able person. Our relationship lasts for 5 years. We resonate. I have tremendous respect, and I say it for the first time, actually, on air, or we will air it. But as Jobs said once famously, I don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. I hire them to tell me what to do. And you, Jillian, mentioned that you don't want to poke the bear. Actually, the bear sits right there. You know, that's the pensionizer rotator bear. Basically, what he has is a Google registration of the trade name.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
Pensionizer top 50, which is our index. Basically, that we wanted to make an ETF and then created an extension of it, which basically was our joint idea. Anyway, so you don't want to poke the bear unless the bear is something really new, innovative, and good to your clients. And it should be the advisors who poke you basically for something they need. And as long as you're receptive and open, and we already established that, then basically you use your resources and your numerous designations and your contact with the regulators to make their life, professional life and personal, because it's intertwined, better. So now to you, Ray, about how basically you find, you know, again, well, it's a short experience, but the thing is, what do you think about advisor business model, and what do you want your firm to kind of, as far as collective, to provide to the team on which you're now a player? And with that, we will conclude our podcast.
Okay. Yeah. So
and final words, of course, anything you will want to say.
Okay. So I guess at the end of the day, what made me comfortable when I was speaking with Jillian and Michael, I kind of laid out where I was headed with it. And they were very receptive to what I was doing. Now that I've landed, I've gone into more detail in terms of what my approach is, in terms of digital marketing approach, the index approach, and so forth. So it's been very well received. I think it's a testament to the fact that that's how you operate as an independent. So I am different than, say, somebody else in the firm. They have their own value proposition, their own approach. And that's what truly makes it an independent firm. And they're open to discussion. And again, I think Michael said at the very beginning, the bottom line or the baseline is the CIRO rules, right? Like, what does CIRO say? And is it possible to operate in a certain way? And the way I look at it is, Jillian and Michael and the team in the back office, at head office, they kind of keep you in between the fence lines to make sure you don't stray. And other than that, just kind of, for lack of better words, they more or less leave you alone. But obviously, if you start to stray, you'll be brought back in, which isn't a bad thing, because the last thing you want is a compliance issue or something. So from my perspective, it's very welcoming and refreshing, and it's a nice start from here. And just looking forward to working for a long time. Like, I'm not going to retire, Yuri, so it'll be Freedom 75 for me.
I count on you to be there for at least another 5 years, because we spent 5 years building whatever we built, and we will probably for sure we'll make another episode, because you have to tell the world. But before we decide what we tell the world in the next episode, and this is a pilot, basically, a pilot shouldn't fly by or on, I consider, Canada my native land, to borrow from the anthem. English is not my native language. So whether you fly by the seat of your pants or on the seat of your pants, I'm not sure, but I love improvisation. So let's improvise our last question, and whatever the participants want to say, let's go clockwise again. Anything that we missed, anything at all that you would like to say, considering that we're going to go on LinkedIn, we're going to edit, we're going to add some illustrations and animations and anything that makes it more entertaining, and then we're going to throw it at the unsuspecting public. What would you like them to hear?
Who's first? Me?
You go first,
Ladies.
Joyce.
Right? Ladies first. Let's see. Was there anything missed, or what would we want to hit the public with? Yuri, I think the questions you've asked have allowed us a chance to cover a lot of what we believe is great
you.
about us.
That
So
was the intention.
I mean, I appreciate that. Any opportunity we have to share a bit more about our story and what we're doing. Michael referenced it earlier when he talked about sort of his personal motivations, for people to come up to him on the street. And he does a lot of the front facing work of the company. Like, he's really out there talking to prospects. And I think when people say, hey, really love what you're doing, it's really new, or it's refreshing, or whatever, however it is that they describe it, it's hard on the surface to explain that to people. We're a dealer. Dealers on the surface do sort of the same thing. Ray needs a home in order to run his business. He needs a dealer. So he's working with us, and he could pick amongst, the other dealers that are out there, but we really are doing something different. We have elements that are unique or novel or refreshing, sort of a different take on things. We have a different mindset. We have a tremendous team of staff who also feel the same way. They're really excited about what we're doing, and they can't find it at another dealer. Like, this is a really great thing that we're building, and I look forward to seeing, in 5 years, where will we be? How much more will our sort of philosophies and personalities show? Because maybe the bigger we are, the more reputation we have, it will be more evident that we really are doing something unique and different. But when you're smaller, it's hard to say that. You're little, and there's big competitors out there, and it's hard to get the airtime and to get people to believe you. But we've got people out there like Ray. We've got your podcast here, and we have opportunities to share what we believe in about ourselves, and for advisors to also say what they've enjoyed and what they believe in about us as well. So the opportunity is something we're very grateful for, and we hope to keep delivering, something to the advisor community out there that is unique and that they are really excited to be part of, because we're excited to be building it with them. It is very much something we build not based on what Michael and I think, but rather what we collect from the feedback and ideas from the advisors that give us the opportunity to work with them.
Well, in my opinion, very limited. As I said, it's a pilot, and we are flying for the first time, basically. But
Yeah.
It looks like a soft landing to me for a lot of advisors to come. In my mind, you are a designated destination for them by design, and pun intended. And basically, what I would like to say after Ray basically says whatever he wanted to say, I'll be like a captain, off the ship last. But remind me, I wanted to say about, risk reward, about rewards. And we'll come back to that. But Ray, first of all, anything you wanted to add?
I guess the only thing I could add is I probably should have made my move a lot sooner to Design Wealth. If I could, to use the analogy, turn back time, I wish I would have been in the top 10 or 15 people to move over at the beginning. That was something I probably should have done earlier, but it takes time. So I had to work through some things, but I'm happy I'm here. In terms of the overall structure, I'm very comfortable where things are. The head office, Jillian and Michael, are very supportive of where I want to take the business eventually. I've been very open with my strategy, and I like that. I feel comfortable. I finally feel relaxed, if you will. So that's all I can add to what we've been discussing here.
Well, that's actually what you said sounds like a commercial, MasterCard, priceless. priceless.
Yeah.
And speaking of risk reward, as a former advisor, it's always worst case scenario, risk. What's the risk? Every client wants first to know. Well, Rossman's School of Business, Jillian, it's in your biography, isn't it?
Yeah,
No?
the
Did you-
Rodman School of Management. Yeah.
Of Management, yes. So the professor there has written a book, Playing to Win. I don't remember the name of the author, but he has written it together with Mr. Luffley, who was Procter & Gamble retired CEO. And basically, it was the methodology of winning. My methodology of winning is refusing to lose. Basically, I just think first eliminate the unforced errors and that actually go undefeated. So speaking of risks, they deserve and get much more attention than rewards. Do you know the 3 types of rewards for humans? Essentially, there's the psychologist near Yale, and he says there are 3 types of rewards. So a trivia question, what are they? And we directly coming back to what you said about, success and why advisors should look at your firm, and Ray's only regret being that he didn't find you earlier. So what are the 3 types of rewards?
Oh, well,
humans
geez,
have?
I didn't know I was going to be quizzed on the spot. I mean, are you referring to rewards being sort of financial being one of them, that kind of thing?
Yes, they fall into one of 3 categories, and I will name them. And I only learned it yesterday, so this is not to claim any kind of superiority. I just want to share it. It's my segue into the subject. But so the author of the book says that basically there's 3 types of rewards, and the first one is basically the reward, and I quote, which is called the tribe reward. It's based on empathy, belonging to a team, and sharing other people's train of thought. Basically, what I think a lot of advisors who join you share. This need to be independent, right? So that's called the tribe. Money is a hunt reward. You search, you hunt, you track, you chase, and you catch, right? That's the second type of rewards, and most commonly talked about. But the third one is the self-reward, intrinsic, and it has to do with being a perfectionist, knowing that you did something not noticed by anybody else, but you know that you got better at what you do, that you did the right thing, and self-reward. And I think that your firm and joining it probably is a very rewarding experience. And I think that even for the founders, despite all the tribulations, and I'm sure there's a lot of things behind the scene, and I'm sure there's resistance, and I'm sure there's all kinds of things, but it must be rewarding. And thank you for a very rewarding experience of talking to all of you. I am extremely grateful for the chance to interview you. And I would love to have you again and talk about specific subjects. They say devil wears Prada. Devil is always in the details. And I hope that you will come and we can talk about details at some point. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
So now we're off the protocol. Basically, I will cut out everything and
okay, Yuri, sorry, I gotta run. I've got
Ray has to go. He has a doctor's appointment, and I kept him from it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm running late now.
Terrible.
So I'm sure
I
Jillian's
forgot
got
about it. I got so excited.
Thanks, Ray.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so Jillian's got to run. We both got to run. We'll talk, Yuri, okay?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be in touch again.
Bye.
Jillian, would you like to see the edited version of this thing before we post it anywhere? I'm sure that we can do this. How do you want to handle this? It's not like I'm a professional media guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to if you send us a link, we can check it out. I mean, we said what we said. We can't really I don't think there's anything either one of us said that we want you to scrub out.
I
So,
will remove the ooh,
however,
ah, and you know, and then basically touching my nose or something like that.
yeah.
But
So we trust that you'll do a professional stand-up job, and we, you know, we trust Ray's partnerships and the people he's connected with. So we know you're in good stock. We've got great confidence in the
thank you.
people that Ray selects to do, you know, business with and have relationships with. So send us a link sort of when it's ready, but we're happy to be part of this pilot and give it a try, and it just gives us something sort of fun. I mean, we're not marketing experts. We're open to, we try a podcast or we do this or we try that. And it's just about getting out there and sort of enjoying the experience. You can't, you know, you can't be too concerned with doing things the right way all the time. And, you know, you just have to reach out and connect with new people, which is what this is. So I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you know what, I frankly, do you have a couple of minutes? Because basically,
Yeah,
I wanted
sure.
to kind
I
of.
probably have about 2, 3 minutes, but then I gotta
Oh,
go.
so you have to run. Okay, okay. No, what I just wanted to kind of. Do you listen to podcasts at all? Do you
I
listen
don't.
to the radio? Okay, you
I
probably don't
probably
have the
should,
time.
but I just hasn't fallen into my repertoire of things I do.
I see.
Yeah.
If you wanted to create a de facto RIA society in Canada,
Hmm.
because the regulators don't even acknowledge that there is a difference
Yeah.
between RIAs in the US and everybody else. And those are two completely different type of operators, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, if you don't have the time to answer, basically, I'd like to talk about it if you ever come back. Because there has to be a community, there has to be to understanding with the retail that there's two different business models and they are all bumped together and they're all called advisors. And there's no such thing. There's true advisors and then there's knowledge-based salespeople. Would you be comfortable to talk about that?
Yeah, I think if with some questions like the way you gave us
Right.
the ones before, I think that helps guide and make sure, you know, we know what direction you're going to go. I like, especially with things that don't yet really exist, you know, the IRA network in Canada just doesn't exist yet.
It
You've
doesn't
got,
exist formally, exactly.
right?
So
So to
quasi,
look, maybe contemplate some questions in advance, and Michael's got some really great opinions and insights on the IRA. It's part of the business that he works on in terms of some of our strategy. He spends more time working on that particular strategy, so he's got some insights as well. And I think if the two of us got some questions in advance, we could certainly explore something that would be a topical sort of podcast episode that might be, you know, really interesting.
okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't want
Yeah.
to be a time hog. Thank you again. Thank you for your time and hopefully
All
we
right.
talk again.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.